Kapori. A morena tata katoa, kore rumāpri tēnei wahanga e timata tātou nei uhinga mō tēnei rā. Ko tira ka tika ka whakamuri atu ki a rātou mā kua wehi. A ngā mate hurua te wāku hinga ngā rākua hipa nei, no reire ki a rātou mā hare ki tua te pai o mata huāriki, i reire te tini me te mano e karangatia ki kurungi a koutou, no reire haere ngā mate, haere ngā mate, haere ngā mate. A Tūwharetoa ki a tātou nei whānau pāngiana te taumā o te mā wiwi i tēnei wā, a mā te ringa kaua iwa i mana ki tia ki rātou, a hoko noho he rātou e noho nei, āna, me tia ki rātou i tēnei wā, hoa te ki a rātou te karo te ora, piki te ora, piki te kaha, piki te māramatanga me te rangi māri ngā wā katoa. Ko te ara ki a tātou katoa e rupike mai nei ki rango te tuine o tō tātou nei whare, koutou e whakapiri mai nei ki rungi te purangi i tēnei rā, a tēnei mātua ngāti Tūwharetoa Mihi atu ki a koutou, ana ko te menui ka pai koutou, ana ki tēnei huinga o tātou i tēnei rā, anō reira, ana mā te manaakitanga o iwa e tia ki a tātou, a mo te katoa tātou nei huinga i tēnei rā. Nā tēnā, ana ka huritaku aro ki a iwa, e manaaki tia ki a tātou nei a kōrero, a tātou nei kaupapa mo te rā nei. Nō reira, huri noa tēnā koutou a tēnā tātou. Nō reira, e te māngai me ngā anira pona te toko tau tapu, kia tātou māngai koutou ki mauni tēnei whakamoe me te o mātou. He tātou i ngā kapu katoa, e whakapūkena nei mātou, i roto i tau koutou komitanga. Ko koutou nei hoki te timatanga me te whakaotinga, mai o mātou te mga koutou nei, i roto i tau koutou koroitanga, koe no te māngai ki toi tau toko mai, ai ngā kenei ai. Ai, koutou.
Ko te ahotanga o te whakahoki te mihi, e whakatapoto hia mai, hia mātua te kaunihira aroke. He hono he kuroria ki tātou e maungaro ki te whina whakaro pai ki ngā tāngata katoa. Ngā i tātou e nā hoki o te tātou katoa te rā ki pai ai a mātua. Hui huinga wānanga te rāne. Te rā ki tau ana mana ki tāna ki noi ki o tātou tō tātou kini tu hei tia pōta tau te whera te tuawhitu te kāwiri ki whānui tonu pai mari ki a rātou. Tau tuko hoki ngā whakaro ki o tātou mate. Koutou mate, mātou mate, a mate huhu o te rāne, o te rā tui ki te marama. Tau ki ngā mahara hoki ki te rā korau o koutou te kanua pitiroi, ko tahi tau, ko pahuri ake tana matinga, no reira haere ia me tana tira, me te mahara aka no, kuia hoki te kau mātua nāni whakatuwhira tō mātou tari, ko nei, tari o te kaunihira arohe. I te rāwa o te rā koutou Ngāti Tūwharetoa, no reira, ka nui ngā mihi kia koutou katoa mo i rā tū āhutanga, no reira, ka piti hono tātai hono ta hunga mate ki rātou, o te rā tēnei tātou ta hunga ora e tau nei. Tēnei mā te whakahoki atu te mahi o te tēnā koutou katoa. Nā kānohi o Ngāti Tūwharetoa, tēnei te reo o te kaunihira arohe, e mihi kau atu. Tai atu ki te whare, te papai konei, kei konei, te tia tuarua, te rangatira o tairanga whenua, o nā anei māua ko James. Nā ringa hāpai i te kaupapa nei, o te rā ko James, te tauira pai o te kākahu rangatira, tēnei rā, tēnei tangata o Amerika, e mihi ana ki ai. Hoi no, ka nui ngā mihi kia koutou. Kawe kare o te kumiroa, te mihi, hoi no, i rungi te rā huatanga, tēnā koutou, kei raro.
Yes. Both of us would like to welcome everybody here, and it's been a little while, and it's a great out and it's the past annual as well. So, and thank you for your for opening us up in Haiti. So you're just going to go straight into the agenda. So we apologies. So Judy Harris is going to put an apology, and we have our alternate Tanganui Kingi today.
And we've got apologies from Councillor Downard and also from Councillor Hodge.
Just get a member and a seconder for those apologies. Tanganui Kingi and Bruce Clarkson. Kia ora. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Confirmation of the agenda. So we're just calling for any changes or additions. Whakatau would like to just add a quarter about Clams just after item 9, if everybody's happy with that, just a short discussion on that one. Golden Clams, yeah.
I'm just wondering with that, do we need to get anybody else to join us on Teams? Anyone from that, from Greg's team to?
I'm
just thinking about the possibility of actually making that happen within this morning. It's probably unlikely, but what we could potentially do, I'll message and see if anyone can join. But so
just and yeah, I think the nature of the conversation won't be any advice or anything like that.
yeah,
Okay,
It might be just more about what we might be looking to do
great,
locally
great.
as a response.
Yep.
So was there any other items that you want to add to the agenda? Okay. And I'm happy to confirm the agenda with that one amendment. And in the seconder, seconder Bruce. All those in favour say aye. Against. Don't know if we need the second one in terms of going 6 hours.
Let's hope not.
Okay, so the next item, I think I've got that motion. So yeah, the next item is disclosure of interest. So is any disclosure of interest, and then you're reminded to be aware of maintaining clear separation between personal interests and duties and roles as a member. So it's mainly to declare if there's anything specifically in terms of the items, and I'm not aware of anything obvious. Apply. So for called for clear disclosures, none received. There's no moved and certificate. Confirmation of previous minutes. Any sort of corrections or comments in terms of the minutes?
I'm happy to move those.
Moved Chair Pamela, seconded Danny Lachlan. All those in favour say aye. Against. Oh, good. No matters arising that aren't already covered by agenda items. No. Right. Oh, we're straight into decision items and papers. So the first one is long-term plan update, and we have Jane Eppley online.
Trying to want to move this item to a later time and not reach out and see where they're supposed to be driving this morning.
Oh, they're still driving.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we'll wait for Jane. I think I'm happy. We'll move to the next one if everybody's happy.
Yeah.
Peter will show. So we'll just hold fire number 6. Item 7, Freshwater Policy Review.
Yes, kia ora tātou. Good morning. Ko Peter Wishata Kawinga. I'm a senior policy advisor in the water policy team with the Waikato Regional Council, and just to give you an update on where we are at with the Freshwater Policy Review program. So I guess if the committee's comfortable to take the paper as read, I'm more than happy just to give an overview and just cover off the main points that are in the paper there. So I'm in your hands.
Yes, if you could do the overview, and then we might just give some feedback if that's helpful.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Okay, well, perhaps just a bit of context, of course, and I can use the word the previous government brought about the NPSFM, the National Policy Statement on Freshwater Management 2020, with the expectation that the regional councils, of course, including the Waikato Regional Council, would review its the regional policy statement and the regional plan to give effect to the policy statement. And of course, the expectation is that was to have have been put in place by the 31st of December 2024. So the takeaway there, of course, is it's a very tight time frame. In terms of progressing the project and engagement with partners, sector groups, and the community, we've had 2 rounds, and you'll see there in page 1 of the report that there is actually the round 1 report is available online. The second report, which went to council very recently, is being prepared by our communications team to be made available on the website, and that should soon be very available very soon. Staff have been busy beavering away, getting up to speed with existing documentation. So that includes iwi environmental management plans, deeds of settlement, Te Ture claim settlement legislation in particular, and important documents like Kaupapa Kaitiaki and Te Ture Whaimana. Also, to assist in terms of bringing Te Ao Māori into the process, a technical working group has been established. That's Ngā Tiramara Taronga, and we have membership from Tūwharetoa, which is great. We've had two hui at the time of writing this report. Since the report's been written, we actually have had a 3rd session, which occurred on the 10th of this month. So we're just waiting for the notes and the minutes to be drawn up from there, and to take that the learnings from that further forward. The round 2 wānanga, there were 2 that were held in Taupo and Turangi. And Tūwharetoa were involved in that and gave us particular perspectives on Te Mano Te Wai and long-term visions for Taupo Moana. We also acknowledge, of course, that the very high demands that have been made on the likes of Tūwhare Māori Trust Board and other similar agencies. And no doubt, even with post the election, we're going to be just as busy in terms of just seeing new policies and amendments, etc. So we just wait to see what's going to come out of that process. The round 2 wānanga, they occurred through June and July of this year, and again, we are looking after the round 2 and the possible establishment of co-governance entities in terms of involving tangata whenua in the decision-making role, which is a requirement, I hasten to add, of the NPSFM, and also of course in terms of the JMA agreements which are in place. Just a very quick update on Plan Change 1, Healthy Rivers Waiora. Currently before the Environment Court, there's 6 weeks of hearing time have been set down through until early December. The court commenced hearings in the 25th of December and is just progressing through with the presentation of the cases from the appellant parties, and of course as counsel as the respondent. And that process, as I say, is likely to take at least the time which has been set down, with possibly decisions coming out of the court perhaps in the 1st or 2nd quarter of next year. And that, Chair, is just an overview. I'm more than happy to take questions or observations. I would find that most helpful. Thank you very much.
Any questions from anyone?
I might, so this, I'm going to ask for some feedback specifically on the, from our river iwi discussions, and then maybe just widely in terms of the policy review. Do you mind just giving a bit of an update? Tēnei te mihi kia koutou. Tēnei te mihi kia koe pira. Ko Peter tōku ingoa i Rudia o Ngāti Tūwharetoa. So I'm the Natural Resources Manager, just as for reference point for the Whakatau Māori Trust. So certainly just for context, I think we've, and appreciate the update here, especially recognising the amount of constraint that's been placed on a number of agencies, and certainly for iwi entity. Just with the multitude of reforms that have been taking place, and the requests that have been coming to
not only the Trust Board, but also all of the iwi at this point in time. It'd be fair to say that, especially with the Freshwater Policy review, it's been difficult to engage by virtue of constraints around capacity and capability. And also there's been some confusion, and I take that from a lot of the conversation that we've had with the river iwi directly as well, in terms of engagement around the Freshwater Policy statement or Freshwater Policy review. So I think the engagement to date has, and acknowledged Peter's team and Tipini, who's been engaged in that space, to try and actively engage. But I think it's been difficult to the point where, from the Trust Board perspective, we'd want to see some closer engagement around the involvement from a partnership level and co-governance arrangement. So just as a note, really. Whilst we've been constrained in that space, it's an important area that we need to be involved in, and would like to work forward going together in terms of the greater visibility and engagement in that space.
Thank you.
Can I understand a bit more about what that would look like for you? Would it look like substantially more meetings lined up so that we can have a greater ability to engage, or is it the way we're meeting?
Yes, absolutely. So I think we look back in terms of the engagement through PC1 and the initial stages and right through, there was a much more collaborative approach around that specific review. So I would think that it would be something more in line with that and showing a bit more of a closer partnership around, especially the settlement arrangements between the Trust Board and the Regional Council, and likewise, without talking on behalf of it, there would be a similar thing that will come across from another ability.
Yes, but I guess at a governance level, it does feel like we're sort of trying to reinvent the wheel in terms of, just put ads in the paper and we'll come and talk to you and got a, and I think just to add to Peter's corridor about the difficulty in terms of the engagement. I mean, a big part of it too is also being confident, what is the end goal here? And so we're talking about our obligations in terms of national policy statements and things, but is there going to be some sort of practical outcome which is going to achieve some of the things that have been raised through this process? And I think there's a whole lot of information that you have already in terms of the issues that we're having, in particular with freshwater, including obviously Te Whaiman and everything else. So that's, I think, part of it as well. You say, well, look, I just want to come talk to you. So I got, and the perception is, I'm just ticking our box here and things. But there's obviously frustration for yourselves and us in terms of PC1, and as Peter reminded us, there's quite a significant amount of engagement, in trying new things in terms of modern day techniques, in terms of collaborative engagement, and so obviously it's the hard part's doing, but I think that's a big part of this as well, Pamela. Is there going to be a good positive outcome in terms of this policy, or is it just going to be something that sits on the shelf? And that's, that's, and we're not there, I think. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And also with Te Whaiman review in place, I think that's been confusing as well in terms of the crossover, and also time and effort in that space versus time and effort in the freshwater policy space. While there is some crossover, and there's certainly some connection to Manawa to Wai in terms of the wider catchment, and for each iwi will be different, for each input will be certainly different as well. So it's certainly not trying to say that there's an easy pathway forward. I think it's still going to be complex and it will require a lot of engagement. So it's just noting that really.
And just to finish off for me, it sort of alludes to setting up new co-governance arrangements and a whole lot of other things. which would then send the signal that council doesn't believe that the current arrangements, whether it's JMAs and everything else, are the appropriate place, for want of a better word. So that's just going to potentially bring in more problems. But yeah, I think my understanding is that it's proposed to be like a collective response from the review in terms of the specific engagement. But yeah, those are my key ones. One is, are we going to get something useful at the end of this process? And also probably in terms of a focus, in terms of engagement, just making sure in terms of your existing arrangements, whether it's JMAs, this, that, and everything else, get those right as well. We're not saying don't talk to people. We always encourage, talk to everybody. But I think in terms of an appropriate way to do this, whether it's kipapa, kaiteki, this, that, and everything else, follow those things. Yeah. Marley?
May I, just for clarity, because this is extremely useful for us as we move into standing up co-governance. I'm hearing that the existing mechanisms, our JMA, is potentially the preferred mechanism for Tūwharetoa Māori Trust Board.
It would be for the board. Yes. And I'm guessing the other review, I'm pretty clear what they're saying, but I'm assuming that existing JMAs would be something that they would be looking at as well. But that, like I said, we're expecting communique from that collective, and
Really useful, thank you.
And I suppose the comments that you've made around capacity to engage, we've heard that from others as well. And so this is a message that we've heard loud and clear from a number of our AD partners. We've also heard it from other sectors as well as the commentary on some of the confusion when people have been involved in PC1 for what seems like forever. And then we layer this over the top. There are different boundaries on it. There's different parties that are involved in all of it. There's different drivers, and so that confusion over what it is we're talking about, what we're ultimately trying to achieve, I've heard that from a number of others as well. And so we hear the message loud and clear that we need to get more constructive and collaborative in our engagement, and it is good to hear from the trust board that this is a vehicle that you have faith in and feel is purposeful for achieving what we're trying to achieve through this. I think that those are useful conversations to have for WRC to have with our myriad of partners across the world, and make sure that we're getting the level of input that we need to ensure that the policy is going to deliver what we all ultimately want, which is healthier waterways. So thank you for sharing all of that.
And we know that it's not easy.
Yeah.
And we all should have started a long time ago, eh?
Well, I think my only comment is that we have been engaging with PC1, this, that, and everything else. So there's a lot of information that we've shared already, which is, if you want a better word, on file, which would help inform. So I guess for us, my personal view, it's more around how we're going to have freshwater policy that's going to be able to deliver those outcomes rather than just me telling you again, we don't like the water quality in Hamilton.
Yeah.
I think we've had a good quarter on that one.
Yes.
So we have the proposed resolution on the screen, that the report update on freshwater policy review work program for 2023. I'll keep bringing it up. Be received. Stu, do you want to move that one?
Yeah, no, happy to move it. And look, hey, thanks for your feedback. Acknowledge all that. And as you guys know, it was always a lot of the donkey work was done through PC1. It was a pretty intensive process, and the intent, I think, is to ensure that we piggyback on a lot of that information. But of course, yeah, going forward, we need to make sure we get this process right. So we'll certainly be taking that back and getting back to you in due course. Yeah, so thank you. So happy to move.
The seconder. See, Ngāhere is looking at the resolution one. Yes, seconded Ngāhere Wall. Put the motion, all the aye, against carried. So with your indulgence, we'll move back to item 6 and assuming you're Jane. No, you're not Jane, the whole estate, Jane.
He was Haven.
Hey,
I was going to sit next to you.
It's a stop. So who am I welcoming today?
So, Evan Walsh, tēnā koutou katoa, ko upi te whakapaparanga mai, ko Kimeriti te whenua tupu, ko Kimeriti te kāinga I Corporate Planning Manager o I o Kunahere Arohe o Waikato o, ko Evan Walsh toko ingoa, tēnā koutou. Apologies, yes, I'm here.
Would you like a glass of water?
Yes, please.
Sorry.
Apologies for lateness.
We're all relaxed here. So we've got your report from Jane, and show you have the floor.
I think yes, so yes, Jane, there's the senior corporate planning manager in our corporate planning team. It's a fairly high level report, which essentially we're just trying to outline a little process for the LTP. I suspect there's a good understanding of LTP processes and how they work. But yeah, essentially was to give you the update of our regular LTP process, which comes around every 3 years. The LTP does capture everything that our council does, how much it costs and how they will be paid for. So right now we're in the middle of our discussions with councillors and staff, trying to map out our work programs for the next 10 years. So in early next year, we'll look to have a draft long-term plan to go out and consult with. The key is that we're trying to give effect to that strategic direction that it's outlined in the report. But yeah, we want to look for ways to keep this committee informed. We don't have our timing nailed down exactly for consultation processes, but yeah, essentially it was just to map out, let you know we're doing it, and that we're keen to keep the communication going as we put the long-term plan together.
So
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead. So we're obviously, like I say, used to long-term planning processes. As current councillors and former councillors are in the table. Just interested at a very high level, what are the key differences between this plan and the previous one? Obviously, you've got more work to do, which you don't get funded for. But was any sort of key sort of things in this new plan?
Yeah, we are in an environment where affordability is front of mind for everyone, but at the same time, we have got a couple of changes to our strategic direction there. So there's a bit of a, well, not a brand new focus with transition to a low emissions economy, but there's just a bit of a change from climate change. And I guess, so we're just trying to think what that means for our work programs. And then I guess that's kind of the main area where we're trying to have a bit of a rethink. But essentially, we've got existing work programs, and it's just tweaking that to our new existing strategic direction. At this stage, I'm not getting the sense of wholesale big swaths of new pieces of work, but yeah, we're kind of working through that with our elected members at the moment.
Yeah, I suppose we have as councillors had a number of workshops already, just looking at our new strategic plan and what does that mean in terms of the programs. And it is that tension between there's always more work to do than we can afford to do. and our communities can afford to do, right? And so it's how do we, I suppose particularly initially as a council, work through those tensions. And I suppose that I reflect on some of the other conversations I've had across other councils and most councils and, well, actually across the country are in the same sort of boat in terms of affordability and recognizing that our communities are having challenges with cost of living. And we don't want to add burden to that, but we also recognize that it seems like every day we have a few new things on our plate. You've added an agenda item on one of them that's cropped up just in the last year for, well, at least that we're aware of. And so I suppose it's, I suppose it's just giving you an indication of the direction of travel with our strategic plan, but we are still in that formative place. So I suppose it would be helpful for us as councillors to hear, when you look at those strategic directions, are there things that leap out for you as areas that are of specific priority for you, areas you would like to see us have additional focus, so that then we can reflect those back in our conversations as councillors as we go along the development journey on this. I don't know if anybody.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we wear lots of hats, but you'll be like with the previous conversations, you'll be wearing most of them. You know, if I put a Tūwharetoa District Council hat on, transportation is still a big one.
Yes.
You know, we've got these remote communities like Turangi, and how you manage those things, and these, and then there'll be the old chestnuts like pest control, for example, and difficulties where the national level funding's been pulled back. But you know, there's the risks of not doing that work.
Yeah.
When you get tuberculosis on farms and things, I mean, we've got stock movements and a whole range of things. So we get it's hard. I mean, it is just a process of prioritisation and understanding where the community is at and things. But I don't think there's anything specific unless Peter's got something at a technical level. It's more the I think you are aware of them, and where it's how do you prioritise the southern end of your district compared to, you know, the more urban sort of type issues.
Yeah.
Is there any feedback?
So generally, the 6 points that I think you've raised already, certainly freshwater is the board is actually would be a high priority for us. Again, it probably just need to take a look at the areas and some detail, and then give them some air from that.
Great. And I suppose that as we get clearer, as we move through the process, it would be really great to be able to work into our schedule some touch points where we can come back and say, this is where things are landing, just so it's not some big, and here you go, and a big surprise. So I think if we can work that into our schedule, that would be helpful. Just in response to your comments about rural transportation, I suppose we're picking that up in the community connections area of focus. But certainly what you're saying around accessibility for our rural communities is something that we are well aware of, and recognizing that ensuring that people have access to education, to jobs, to healthcare, and we recognize that most of those things are happening in larger areas. We need to facilitate those transport corridors and public transport options. Your comment around pest control, I think that where there might be some avenue for collective influence, shall we say, is recognizing the role of central government in some of this pest control as well. whether we're talking about golden clams, which we'll talk about later today, but also in terms of central government stepping back from Cody dieback and trying to think.
Wallabies.
And wallabies. We've got a new wallaby in the area. Well, new to the area, right? And I suppose there's some tension, at least in my view, when central government puts money into something and then eventually says, okay, we're going to back out of that. You all collectively pick it up, please. And if we're going to, if we value our taonga species and we want to protect that, these are national taonga. And so I think that there may be some avenue for us to have some collective voice with central government around their role in supporting our regional initiatives.
Certainly it's biodiversity, but it also has quite important economic implications.
Absolutely.
As well.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we'll just, I think, let the process flow and we'll engage with your team at the trust board. I'm sure obviously there's going to be a lot more other different discussions as well. But in terms of, I had a look at the high level report and the sustainable goal, international sustainable goals, and I had to look at your pestle analysis for the link was broken. Oh, sorry.
We shall send out a fixed link. We shall take that action.
I thought it was really good at reading my board. I think at a very high level, I mean, I think it's business as usual, but with slightly higher aspirations in terms of water and biodiversity. I think that's an appropriate, like you say, in the current world we're living in. Yeah, so I'm just going to put the resolution that's up on the screen. Would you like to move?
I'm happy to move that.
And I'm happy to second that resolution. And thank you for making it here in one piece, and which is always the most important. Yes, these. I'll put the motion. All those opposed say aye. Yes. Thank you, Stu. So we just move back to item 8 now. We've got Judy. Welcome, Judy. You're in the hot seat.
Oh, sorry.
Whakatau, ko Judy Benrosson tōku Northern Netherlands o Whakatau. I tai mai o Whakatau ki Aotearoa. I te tau whotahi mano I wahau I ngā tekau. I whanau mai aho ki Tamakuna Kaurau. Ko te toio ka whawe toko moa, o Manukau toko moana. E nāre ki Tamahiri aho e noho rā. No reira. Morena, my name's Judy Benrosson and I work in the policy implementation team at council as a specialist in the biodiversity area. So prior to that, I was working in the biodiversity and biosecurity section in an operational role. So this report introduces our intention to progress a Waikato biodiversity accord with key stakeholders as stated in our strategic direction. So by way of background, you will probably be able to the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity, or the NPSIB, which came into effect on the 4th of August. And the NPSIB is quite an important regulatory tool, and it helps to drive the National Biodiversity Strategy Te Mana Aotearoa. So the NPSIB contains a number of directives for council, and one of those is a statutory requirement for us to develop a regional biodiversity strategy. So the intent of this is for each region to develop and implement a community and stakeholder driven strategic plan for restoring biodiversity at a landscape level. So the focus of these regional biodiversity strategies is about improving biodiversity at regional level. So there is quite a generous timeframe of 10 years for completing these strategies. And there's a really strong focus in the MPSIB on Te Whenua as partners and incorporating Māori worldviews. So the idea behind the Waikato Biodiversity Accord is that we want to bring those organisations together that have core responsibilities for biodiversity management to work together to develop a regional biodiversity strategy. So we envisaged that this would be quite a simple non-statutory agreement to be entered into voluntarily by the signatory parties. So at this stage we see it containing like a purpose statement, some objectives and a statement of commitment to work together. But this is flexible and, you know, to hear some feedback about what you would see or what you would prefer to have in it. So we already have some examples of similar documents. So for instance, we've got the Waipaha Pet Lakes and Wetlands Accord, and we've got a similar one for the Waikato Lakes Accord. There's also obviously the Taupo Lakes Accord. We're not looking at something quite as detailed and comprehensive as that at this stage, because we still also have the strategy as another longer term project. So the signatories that we are keen to have on this accord would be those with the statutory biodiversity management functions, and in the paper there's a table that shows those organisations. So it's the Department of Conservation, all our territorial authorities, Ministry for Primary Industries, the Kiwi2 National Trust as a covering covenanting organisation, and also our key iwi partners. So once the accord is formalised, we propose that the signatories work together to prepare a regional biodiversity strategy. And at that stage, we would involve bringing along all of the other stakeholders, such as the industry and advocacy groups with an interest in biodiversity management, to help us with that. So by taking this two-phased approach, so by doing the accord first and then the strategy, we can have those conversations early about the best and most effective way to work together. And, you know, we're really conscious of all the consultation and engagement workload at the moment. So over the next 2 to 3 months, we'd like to engage, well, we will engage with iwi and agency partners to provide a heads up, and that's what we're doing now, about the accord. And then we're looking to have a workshop prior to the end of the year. So we'd like to develop a first draft of the accord by the middle of next year. So we greatly appreciate the steer from this committee anyway as to the best approach and who to help us with drafting the content of the accord, and also how we would like to work, or how you would like to work with us. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Well, my is I'll let, if you're happy, I'll let Peter do it all, and then I'll give some feedback as well.
So can you jump in quickly? I think just from the context setting for us, because the Trust Board has put in numerous submissions on the MPSIB, so there might be some value in reading through those too. And I think that the biggest concern is around that, and not only the engagement, well, there's a number of concerns around the engagement that process in terms of significant natural areas preceding this national policy statement. And the important thing to note is, from a collective of landowners, the Trust Board obviously being the administrator of the lake bed and its tributaries, there's been an area to try and recognise which is around the true impact of those landowners when placing significant natural areas across any of those compartments of land. So it does create quite an extensive impact to those landowners when you look at the entirety of the catchment and how it's holistically been managed throughout generations in terms of water quality, etc. So that's been the big push from the Trust Board in terms of our submissions, is recognising or trying to explain the true impact to landowners when it comes to SNAs in particular. Whilst we don't have an issue with improving Indigenous biodiversity, It's more around the impact of those landowners and their decision-making ability when you have that mechanism placed across the top of that. Likewise with the lake, especially within that there is a management board that exists already, as well as the trust board. So there needs to be some direct consideration around how that's provided for and under the NPSIP. And acknowledge also there is an area which is classified around looking at Māori land specifically. I think the big driver from the trust board was that it didn't go far enough to exclude Māori land. So the relationship, the engagement going forward is going to be critical in that space. Whilst I think the time frame could be difficult as well, given that the engagement you'll need it won't only just be with the trust, but it will be with those landowners. And they do hold significant amounts of property, especially in the forestry estates, but also within farming estate as well. So there's numerous areas that you're going to have to consider and how you're going to engage in that space, given that they're proportionately high Māori land ownership within the Tūwharetoa in terms of general title. So I think maybe when going forward, how we engage in that space and identify a timeline that might be more realistic. I think if we try and drive towards the middle of next year, you'll find that it'll be underdone, or you won't get the engagement that you really need to have a true indication of what that means going forward.
Yeah, absolutely hearing what you're saying and absolutely understand the impact of SNAs on Māori land, particularly because of the history of colonisation and confiscation and all of the things that have been brought to bear on what suite of assets you have to currently work with. I'm wondering, have you been engaged in the opportunity to comment on biodiversity credits? Because it seems to me the biggest thing that is still needed in this process is that willing owners get some credit for the work they've been doing for centuries. And so you're engaging in that process, because I think the deadline's November.
3rd of May.
Yeah, very soon.
So yes, we've had a consultant working in the initial phases, but Tina Pura has also been running that process on behalf of the Crown in terms of what does a biodiversity credit system look like. I know that's still at some pretty initial stages, and how realistic will it be? One point, I guess, that we did put in our submission is how do you resource those that have to forego in place an SNA across their property, and so that's one way of looking at it. And again, I think the national policy statement hadn't gone far enough to recognise that and probably put the onus back on regional district councils to resource that space. So there was some emphasis placed in that space as well. It's still early in the process for that particular credit system to be certain that it's going to be fruitful or if there's any value in it. So we just want to continue to engage in that space to feel whether we're, and as it progresses, have the option to opt in or out depending on what comes of it really. But certainly aware of it.
I mean, there is, yeah, as you say, it's very early stages and it's untested in New Zealand, although it has been tested in other countries around the world, particularly in Australia. And there's sometimes a danger too of, perverse results of a credit system. But having said that, there are also good examples around the world where those sorts of systems have assisted landowners to essentially do the things in many cases they've been doing anyway, but to get credit for it.
Yeah, probably just as a small example, when talking to someone recently, there's a property which is near to the southern boundary of Tūwharetoa, which is around Untitled, and you have big blocks of land that they were looking to invest into Mānuka as a potential earning or economy to build from. But again, when you start to look at the the classification of an SNA placed across that property, then you completely taken away any decision making going forward for the future of that property. You've locked that up potentially. So those are the types of that place decision making that's required for those landowners. Is how do you develop your land, but note that you might want to change that in 20 years time, or you might want to change that at 50 years time. But you've effectively been locked in by the choices that have been made around trying to create economies, etc. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, we can talk about these things in greater detail on another occasion, but I do know that there was quite a lot of effort went in to adapt previous versions of the NPS to address some of the issues you've just raised. So, the question is, has it actually gone far enough yet? That's the question.
Yeah. The answer is no. From our perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Peter's right. I think it'd be useful for you to have a look at the submissions that were made by collectives of Māori landowners and shares. Tūwharetoa still, if you include the lake, owns 50% of the land in this rohe, which is quite significant because the next biggest is like DOC. And so, and our views, which will be reflected in those submissions, is that we have biodiversity in this area because we've looked after our forests. So then, so in terms of those perverse outcomes you talked about, we're in a situation where we're being targeted because that's how our people feel, and that should be reflected in the submissions through this process. I think an accord, it's a requirement, just like anything else, the board will engage, and it'll likely be the other ones that are part of settlements will want to participate as well. So that'd be a good starting point, I guess. A big one for us, though, will be recognition of Te Tiriti, but even also the treaty in terms of whether it's the treaty in terms of undisturbed possession of your land to this. And I think that's going to be a big one in terms of this engagement. Obviously, ones like DOC, they've got requirements to sort of affect to these sorts of things. But I think in any accord, when you're talking about all these agencies and everything else, I think that's that starting point. And I think if we get that one right, then what flows from there in terms of Tūwharetoa and the other iwi, obviously, that are part of this area, will see the ability to do things correctly. If you use the example of the trust board, to repeat 2 rounds of the whole SNA type arrangements, and the second one, there's a report that's put together by regional council, which basically put this big orange thing over our lake, because in some corner of the middle of nowhere, there's a little bit of native plant that's perfectly fine sitting there by itself. But then we have this sort of what we see as a hammer trying to smash a nut which doesn't really need to be smashed in the first place being used. So I think for us, in terms of how we reflect this corridor around the treatment of Māori land, it's going to be a big one. And hence the discussion around the treaty in terms of those rights and protections that should be likely afforded. And then that way the policy that flows out in terms of, or the strategy that flows out of it will start, I think, in the right place. So I get, from a council point of view, the starting point is biodiversity. Whereas our worldview doesn't start there. It starts with, because we've maintained our rangatiratanga over our whenua, we still maintain this biodiversity. And then you've got a slightly different nuance, which is probably more my personal opinion there, because you do have large swathes of land that we look after, but also DOC. you know, there's quite a lot of biodiversity being protected in our region relative to, say, Hamilton or anywhere else. So, you know, trying to treat all the different areas the same doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of a strategy. But yeah, those are the things that we would like you to reflect on. I think specifically putting a big orange blob over Lake Taupo and, you know, saying that you can't do this, that, or anything else, because you'll find a lot of it's a sand. It's not actually necessary, you know. And certainly you'll find that I'm not aware of any direct threats to any particular species of native. You might just need to do alt tab there just to bring that one back. I'm sure there's another way of doing it, but alt tab the old fashioned way.
Yeah, just standing.
Sorry, I'm using last century command things for Microsoft. But yeah, that's quite a big one for us as an iwi. And I think in terms of developing an accord, you'll find that we've been fairly consistent with DOC and everybody else in terms of that. So I'd probably have it quite up there in terms of how you do those discussions. And I think if you do that well, then the process of pulling together an accord will be much easier. But yes, it'd be fed, you know, Peter's probably a little bit more diplomatic than I am in terms of extreme dislike from our iwi in terms of SNAs. It's up there, and that was reflected, you know, marches up north on the state and everything else. It's seen as a threat. So it's not necessarily because we want to develop, you know, there might be some that want to do some manaka, not so much now, but it's more around the interference and the enjoyment of our public is offensive. And so I think within the confines of the existing legislation, maybe the new government might want to do something anyway, but within the confines of that, I think we need to make sure that the accord tries to achieve those goals. Is there any other comments from your team? You got some people on the screen, they might want to say something, I don't know.
Oh, you joined us for the next.
Oh, they're over there for the next one. They don't want to wait for us. Okay.
If I can just make a comment about the accord. We're seeing it as quite a high level document, and it's about the way that we work together to sort these issues out rather than the detail around SNAs, although we, you know, in some way, if we can capture that desire to have those biodiversity outcomes, but also the outcomes for that Māori want in terms of development of their land as well, and capture that in a more broader statement that becomes part of the accord, then that would be a positive step. But we do see it as very much a high level. This is the beginning. Yeah, I get detail comes
actually develop. I'd say to you, look, if you don't have the treaty or Te Tiriti sort of recognised in this accord, you may find you don't get a lot of support from any of the iwi. That would be my comment. And then the second one is again what flows from that. You know, I mean, if I was writing an accord, I'd be saying, look, yes, we've got the statutory obligation. Our key goal is to protect biodiversity. If we can find ways that does that consistent with the treaty and their property rights, then that's a great outcome. So, for example, I know one land block that's in a Ngā Whenua Rawi Kawanata, and so you would argue that it's not sufficient protection, and there'll be a desire because of processes where council still wants to put something on their title. But I would say to you that it's not the right approach. You know, the right approach might be just a document that says if you have Ngā Whenua Rawi Kawanatas, then that's sufficient protection, and that's it in terms of, we don't want to be part of a database with this, that, and everything else. We don't think that's appropriate. especially when it's biodiversity we're trying to protect. Again, it's how you do it. Anyway, I think we've had enough. Corder, I think you've got the message. It's our message. I mean, I'm sure you'll get something similar from other media. If, I think an accord, I mean, if you look at an accord just for the whole region, I think that makes some sense.
It may be that we don't call it an accord. It might be a pledge or something like that.
Well, I'm guessing it's it's a requirement of the Act.
I don't think
Not
the
being
board is not a requirement.
The strategy is.
This was just our method of sort of getting agreement as to how we were going to work together to meet our obligations under the NPS with regards to delivering that strategy over the next 10 years. So, or sooner if we could.
But taking your point about treaty framework, national policy statement and the accord will have to take account to mana o te taio. And it's front and centre in that document that this must be within a treaty framework. So these guys will have to respond to that.
And I think that is something you might want to reflect on a accord level without getting into the details.
Yes, right. Yeah.
So, the expectation is that biodiversity gets then miners get to enjoy their land, the treaty's being looked after, and everybody's happy, sort of type thing. And then it will get into the credits, biodiversity credits, and all a whole lot of other opportunities. So we need a mover in a second. He hasn't moved for a while.
Going to move that first?
I'll move that.
Thank you, Bruce. Eddie, we'll pick down biodiversity. And look, you two, you're both also trustees on the Tūwharetoa MTB. If there's any sort of feedback, if you think it might be useful just to say, whether reflecting the view of the board well. It might some just being too nice, but
No, I think that you've said it all in terms of biodiversity. What our view would be from the board. Yes, so I didn't need to repeat it.
But also, I think too, from the Māori authorities. I mean, when we didn't do those submissions, we did do that collectively. And we did it work with our, iwi chairs to try and address these issues. And we had the previous government had strong alliances with the Green Party who, I think they generally tried to reflect certain issues, but we're still they're afraid that, more swamps are going to get drained and this, that, and everything else. Whereas I would argue that you don't have all of that in recent times. Therefore.
I think your high level comments are right up there then. Like for me, it was just around, it's been acknowledged earlier around that, that capacity thing, but also when we're engaged, we have to be aware of the issues that are in front of us versus the intent of bringing a group together. And if we can't sort of address those, then why would we want to be there? So I think everything you've said there, I totally think that's kind of where we are, and it's probably the helpful intel that the council needs to hear to just think, okay, well, I know why you're trying to sort of achieve that, but if you want greater involvement and participation, you're going to have to figure out a way to take everybody on that journey.
And just to finish up too, and we're in 2023, so we've got variation 5, we've got variation 6, which will that plane change flat. And I think those have a lot of them in terms of use of rural land. In terms of like you don't see any more dairy farms because nobody can get the water to do it. And even if they could, not plane change 1 in theory would not be supporting it, and certainly variation 5 would make it near on impossible. So there's also that ecosystem of policies and things that work with them. Anyway, so we've got a movement. Did we get a seconder? No, put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Now we have, is it Patrick Lynch online?
Good morning, everyone. Yes, Patrick Lynch and Wayne Reid. Just by way of explanation, at our end, you're a very small image, so we may not be able to tell who is actually talking in the room. I'm not sure what it's like at your end. So,
okay. You can see the video screen though in the corner, or
We have the screen. With the full screen is currently showing the what appear to be the agenda, and then we just have a small image off to one side of the boardroom.
What we might do is we might just try and hide that and just have the full screen just for now. So we've got the full screen of you. Can you see us a little bit?
Yes, thank you.
Much bigger. But we're, welcome, gentlemen. So we're now on to item 9, which is vehicles and water bodies, which just happened to be one of the ones that I encouraged to put on our list. And maybe if you just talk to your paper first, and then we'll just have a discussion if everybody's happy with that.
Yeah, thank you. So there's not a paper as such. We were aware that there was a particular incident on the 29th of July, and how it was responded to by the regional council was seen as substandard and caused some significant upset, and we acknowledge that and apologise for that. So not sure whether you're wanting to know the detail of that particular incident, or more generically how we respond, and probably more importantly what we learned from that incident and how we're trying to be better. So happy to go wherever it is that you would like to go.
I think for us it's the latter, and it is about the way forward. So I guess the key themes for me in terms of the discussion is, one is how regional council is, for want of a better word, advocating to Whakatau in terms of how do we minimise the reduction of these incidents in the short term. We just want to make sure they were all on the same page, all pushing quite strongly. So there is a lot of consternation in terms of these incidents. You've got a whole community of people in Tūrangi who, from an economic point of view, find it quite difficult when they can't use their highway because it's blocked by cranes lifting up trucks and things. So they're part of your constituent. So they're pretty, I'll go with angry today, I'll go with angry. And then the specific technical stuff we'd like to touch on, which is about response kits and where those are located, and maybe how we can work better and smarter in the future in terms of being able to have a more timely response. So certainly the one where the truck fell in the river, we've got Ngāhere here who's quite close to that incident, physically living quite close to it, who can also maybe give feedback at that level if necessary. But I think we certainly, this discussion is about the latter, and what we might do better in the future to deal with that. So I'll hand it back to you guys.
Thank you. So look, to the Mangamutu in the first instance, I'll just give a little bit of context. So during business hours, we have a team that Wayne leads of full-time staff. Their sole purpose for being is to be responding to incidents. Outside business hours, we do have a 24/7 response. Outside business hours, it's a slightly different model in that we have a roster of a small pool of people who put their hand up to say, yes, out of hours, we will attend these on behalf of council. And they're on call, on a roster. And so that's a team of essentially 3 people at any one time. The 2 people who would physically go and attend something, and then a supervisor for them to help consider aspect. Now we get about 2,000 calls a year. We certainly don't physically attend 2,000 incidents a year. We tend to physically attend about 1/3 of the calls that we get. And so after hours, it sits with these 3 people as to weigh and balance the information they receive and make a decision as to whether they go and physically attend something or not. Now, I think it's pretty clear that if we were remaking that decision today, we would be attending. We would be physically attending. Now, it's hard for me to be critical of the 3 people who were on call and who made that decision. They made the decision based on what they thought was the right criteria. Since then, I've spoken with all of the people who sit on that ready response team, and what I've asked them to do is to have a broader consideration for whether they attend or not, and the kind of things that they need to take into account, and possibly weren't in this instance, is the value of the receiving environment. So clearly a high value environment. If there's some risk to that, surely that escalates how it is that we respond. There's been, I think we have lapsed a little bit with that ready response service. Is, they're the ones getting the calls at 2 o'clock in the morning. Is that where the mindset had been going? Is when there's actually a contaminant in water, so it's actual. And so what I've invited them to do, and that on-call supervisor, is to, you've also got to consider risk, because in this situation where you've got a truck, the cab of a truck sitting in a stream, it might not be leaking diesel at that very moment, but of course it could be in 10 minutes time, as it's getting extracted from the water or whatever. So we're basically using this as a learning opportunity for ourselves as to, hey, are we considering fully all of the circumstances, all of the surrounding things that we should be, whether we decide whether we go or not. So,
just
sorry,
clarify, where your after hours crew is located?
Yeah, so all of our response people, all of our regulatory and response people are in, they work from the Hamilton office, but will live in the general Hamilton area. We have people, perhaps up to 30, 40 minutes drive away from here, but their base of operations is the Hamilton office. So the other thing that I've asked them to consider as well is making it very, very clear to them is that we're a regional service, we're not a Hamilton service. So the Tūwharetoa distance can't come into this. So if something happens at Turangi or the tip of the Coromandel, is that in some respects that shouldn't be a factor in our attendance or not. Our service should be as consistent as it can across the region. So I think, that was a pretty good discussion we had with all our ready response people, and particularly those on-call sort of supervisor after hours. I think it was quite challenging for them to sort of rethink how it is that they think about prioritising these things and attending them. But I think the message, Wayne might have a comment on this, because they're all people that report directly to Wayne, is that I think that message has been learnt, has been heard, and there's been some learnings from this.
Very much so. And I guess we've had one recently last month, again at Boiling Point. So by my calculations, since November 22, we've had, it makes it 3 now in that stretch of road. Maybe just answer one of your questions that you raised early on. I was at the debrief of the first Boiling Point spill, which was the krill oil, and Whakatau, where there was quite a bit of discussion about deterrence of trucks going on that road. I think you wanted that addressed. So Whakatau talked about some sort of looking into some sort of toll or some sort of ways of deterring trucks from going around the lake that side. I don't know where that's got to.
It's a tricky one, and I take your point. I mean, I suppose a truck ending up in the waterway is a little bit the symptom in this. The cause, I suppose, is it the roading itself? Is it the volume of trucks? Is it how it is that the trucks are being driven? And there's probably a few contributing factors to your initial big ticket point, which is about reducing or eliminating the number of vehicles going into waterways. So I suppose just giving some context for what it is that we have a mandate to operate in is the team that provides that environmental incident response. Our mandate to operate is currently the Resource Management Act, And so this is very much about discharges of contaminants into the environment, that type of thing. Certainly this part of the business doesn't have any direct control or influence in respect of roading, traffic, heavy vehicles, those sorts of things. So those would sit with other agencies.
I would comment though that we do convene the Regional Transport Committee. And I think that would be an avenue for influence. So and like for instance, Tūwharetoa District Council would have a representative on that alongside Waikato Regional Council. So I think that that's one avenue for bringing up raising those issues.
That's part of the reason for raising on the agenda today is to try and send a consistent message to Wellington, albeit a new Wellington. Ironically, during the election, there was comments made by the National Party member for Whakatau in terms of being a priority, because when the future Prime Minister was having a hui and at the prisons and then was moving north, he had to go the long way because of the road being blocked for him.
Sometimes it's those types of learning experiences that people need.
Yeah, I guess the key one. So I'm going to send a signal. There's a big expectation gap in terms of what Tūwharetoa Māori Trust would see as a response and what we're talking about here. That's separate to a cultural discussion, which we could still have if needed. But I guess, and I'm not going to talk for Tūwharetoa District Council, but certainly the discussions we've been having is that we need to have, for want of a better word, a rapid response team, for want of a better word. This is still early discussions, but if you use the example of Bully Point, where you had people from DIA in terms of Harbour Master, where you had support from Genesis Energy because they've got certain capability as well as our local people who've got some knowledge in this area. So it's kind of this future. Our expectation is that we'll have some sort of immediate responsibility here. And where that becomes untidy is around the comms. Who's in charge, who's doing this and who's doing what and everything else. So I think that would be part of that discussion as well. Now, in my very simplistic mind, because I'm an ex-accountant, and I just look at it, like a deputisation, for want of a better word, in terms of, sorry, Doc, I left Doc out. I get Bubs confused because he does both. But they're also part, I think, of the response in terms of protecting the lake, because that's part of their responsibility. So, in my simplistic world, we'd have some sort of appropriately sized kit that's housed by all counts. We'll probably get in trouble now for saying they should be housing this gear. But that's how important we see protecting the lake. So that's the feedback I think today, which you guys can take away and digest everything else. And whether you call that a gold standard and how it's going to bugger up your long-term plan, I don't know. But certainly that's the sort of practical short-term solutions that we can look at. The medium to long-term solutions is we're trying to have conversations with one of our trusts as a pathway for the bypassing Bully Point, for want of a better word. But a lot of the feedback is that transit doesn't have that in their long-term plan, if that makes sense. But I think eventually we're going to get to a place where that long-term solution needs to be looked at. But yeah, good to hear that there's at least been some discussion at an initial level about tolls and things. Certainly, I think if you're going to have any sort of really bad sort of chemicals being shipped, then going via State Highway 32 or whatever is something that I think should be considered, albeit, time is money for people, and adding that extra to that drive wouldn't be encouraged. But yeah. So I don't know if you have any questions for us. I'm just giving you feedback, and hopefully your team can take away and digest everything else. But yeah, any questions while you've got us? I mean, Ngahiri over here, he would say he's managing the expectations of the hapu there, and their frustrations, for want of a better word, are a lot higher than mine in terms of this conversation.
Thank you. Well, I had images shared with me after the event of, I think it was probably the local harbour master and local hapu actually in the water deploying booms themselves, you know, and to sort of managing that risk. And and that's why I say, and again, I apologise, we should have been there. We should have been there, either been in the water or giving some guidance as to how to go about doing that. That's an absolute from our perspective. What you were speaking to with that response plan, just in case everyone in the room is not aware, is that over the last couple of years, Wayne has been working with all of those different entities to put together a response plan. And in fact, it's been run as an exercise a couple of times as well, that response. So the likes of your power companies, the DIA Harbour Master, FENS, whoever else it might be, know what their role is. Those response plans are, of course, are a little bit generic, because you'll have to respond to whatever it is, the incident on the day, like exactly where it is, and the volumes, the kind of contaminants, all that sort of thing. So there is something that is in place, but I'm not sure it is to the to the level that would have people satisfied. And at the end of the day, that's still the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. The by far the best solution is to keep the ambulance at the top of the cliff, or at least on the road. So yeah.
Patrick, can we get a commitment to share? I assume that you're going to review that response protocol in light of the learnings here. Can we, once you've gone through that process, can we get that shared with this committee so that there's a sense of comfort, I suppose, with the short-term response that's being proposed, or what we can do outside of any LTP process that might require further expenditure, and ahead of the longer term lobbying or influencing that we might need to do. Patrick, are we able to do that?
Yeah, of course. The plan is very operational, because it's literally about who can do what. And happy to look at it again in light of this incident. I think that where the shortfall here is that this protocol wasn't triggered. It's not so much in that the protocol itself is not appropriate, but it's happy to look at it. It's more the fact that it wasn't triggered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Before I hand it over to Tamani, yeah. So I think a plan for the Lake Taupo FMU, for want of a better word, I think that would be one for that. I think that would be useful, and I would take into all the different agencies and everything else we've just been talking about in a nice sort of tidy fashion. But I'll hand it over to Tamanui, who has some expertise in the FENS area.
A few did. Kia Wayne. Just wanted to pick up on that point about the work that Wayne has done in the space. I think I had assisted somewhere along the line, but notwithstanding what has been said, as a operational firefighter of 23 years, having seen every accident under the sun, I think what we're seeing these days, and particularly would apply in this case, is the ongoing environmental impacts come as a result of the recovery phase. And so if you put it in the context of first responders responding, dealing with the incident at hand, that doesn't tend to be where all the action's happening. I mean, in terms of the spill, I think that's occurred when vehicles being lifted. And so I think if you, I can't recall what the plan sort of said around that recovery space, but that's probably where, and I hear what you're saying, that's kind of the pinch point, I suppose, is recovery could happen 2 days later. You know, everyone's gone and it's just the recovery agents. So perhaps my sort of contribution would be is have a look at that bit of the plan. And but of course that's so varied. The recovery is run by the insurance agent on behalf of the companies. So it's about 5 steps removed. So that dude's not going to have any idea about this stuff. I don't know how to reflect that, but certainly that would be my observation over the years, is that it's often down the line. Because I know from a FENS perspective, we had talked about early notification, but FENS fleets, most people are gone by the time these trucks are being righted. And I think that's where this issue was occurring, is it's kind of left to the agents, recovery agents, and that sort of thing. But anyway, that's anything too that I wanted to offer. But you know, the corridor around the volume of traffic, I mean, that's given, and I think even at an iwi level, with just wearing our other hats with our forest companies, I mean, we've taken a proactive approach to asking our drivers, logging drivers, to reduce speeds. And you know, we have that level of influence, but that doesn't apply to the frozen chilled truck that's rocking up and down. You know, so our level of influence, even at an iwi entity, forest level, is still limited. But I guess it just demonstrates that we're trying to get ahead of the curve as far as reducing the likelihood of something. But yeah.
Thank you.
Any other feedback, comments? Stu, you're very quiet today, Stu.
Oh, no, I'm just all listening here. I think well, I've got a lot of questions, but a lot of them are probably going to be answered as a result of what we've asked Patrick and Wayne to go and get some more information on around readiness and siting of response equipment and all that sort of stuff. So yeah. Thanks, Danny.
Right. Okay, if there's no other questions, we've got we'll switch screens and put the resolution back up. So we'll give me just a bit of time to do that. But thank you for your time, gentlemen. And
Thank you.
yeah, I'm sorry for creating more work, but
not at all.
It's one that we're quite passionate about here, and so I'm going to ask Stu to move the resolution. Now he is happy to second.
Yep, no, happy to move.
So it's a bit tongue pretty much. Now you can do it. Yeah, sorry. What's your official title these days, Tanganui? Within FENS?
Oh, no, it's all right.
It's all right. Just one on record.
It might have readiness and recovery there, but
Okay. We'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. So we're now going to move to item 9.5, which is a discussion around golden clams. Was now number 10. Everybody.
We are. Thank you.
Certainly, guys. Thank you, guys. I'm just going to let Peter feedback. So he's been in discussion with the CEO for the trust board around, obviously we've been, like yourselves, been engaging quite a bit in terms of these discussions. I'll hand it over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Danny. Yeah, I think it's been a very interesting space, especially around the comms and with this particular issue that we're all facing. And as we start moving towards a busier period, certainly this summer, it's front and centre for the trust board in terms of management as it comes to the incursion of golden clams. To date, we've held a seat on that governance group that's been put in place, but we haven't actually been sitting at that table. And the direction really around that was to allow those that are dealing with the incursion at place to have the resources made available for them to deal with it. So that was our general take, whilst we all start to understand really what does the incursion mean. from an ecological perspective. We took that directive from when the first delimitation survey was conducted, which was early in the piece, and Lake Popo was surveyed first, and then there was a progression along the Whakatau. Subsequently, since then, the Waikato River has been delimited as well as the Tarawa Lakes, and there's massive interest from Tarawa in terms of what's happening there, given that likewise their ecology in many of those lakes is quite sensitive. We also have the same concerns around how do we minimise and mitigate the risk of transfer from lower in the catchment up to the top end. So I'm in conversations with some of the operational team based on a possible incursion highlighted last week. So I meet with them tomorrow around what does the summer look like for us? What are we trying to achieve, both in communication, but also getting an understanding of what it means to try and mitigate or manage the risk of transfer. So it's kind of where we are today. The key thing for us is a plan, a collaborative plan going into the summer, given that we all represent specific groups that connect with Lake Popo, connect with its tributaries, and so that we all have good information around what we can do to limit the risk. So yeah, it's about just one, highlighting it, and then how do we go to together collaboratively to ensure that we're focused on a commitment around Lake Popo and tributaries as well.
So from a practical point of view, you're going to have people on the ground during the summer, during the peak periods, certain wharves and everything else, and interested in seeing what opportunities you have to support with it. Clean, was it clean, check and dry? And dry, check, clean and dry. That order, but also because it's a response that a number of different everything else we're using. So yeah, I just wanted to get that feedback. Can we move the resolution? Just note it.
Sure. Did you want any further engagement?
No. With engagement, yeah.
I suppose I can't personally speak to how well the governance conversations are happening in that, because I don't personally attend those, and I haven't been briefed ahead of today's meeting as to exactly where we're at in our response. I suppose though that what I can share is our council's concern about the level of response, about how evident the information is in terms of the signage around various waterways and things like that. How well are we communicating? I know that we as a council have raised concerns about how that's being managed. We've raised that with MPI. We did. Yes, we, Councillor Clarkson represented the regional council in a select committee. It was the Environment Select Committee, specifically looking at the response to this incursion. And so we have raised our own concerns about how MPI has interacted and engaged with our council specifically, but also just raising our concerns around, the community across the Rohe is looking at Waikato Regional Council going, how are you going to fix this? And I suppose going back to some of our earlier kōrero today around who funds these responses, right? And does it just inevitably fall on the ratepayers within a particular Rohe, as opposed to we want a national response to this? So we have engaged in those conversations, And we have shared the concerns that we have as a council, and also those concerns have been informed by the various conversations we've had with other stakeholders impacted by this process. I can't necessarily comment today about the very next steps or anything, but I just did want to say that we are engaged in that area. So I don't know, Bruce, you did speak to the select committee, and I know you've been across the report that's come out of that. I don't know if there's anything you would like to share.
Well, the main points that we're trying to make is what's needed for true containment. It's the issue of containment, and also in relation to check, clean and dry, the international evidence in relation to that, the success or otherwise of check, clean and dry is about what's done at place. And I mean directly at place, like at the boat ramp or whatever you want to talk about, and how there's, what monitoring is in place in relation to the movement of the boats that might be the potential vector for the spread. And we raised all of that at select committee, and we did get some acknowledgement, I guess, of the degree of the problem, the magnitude of the problem, but as yet I've not seen any evidence coming from Central. Nothing back in terms of resource, and to me that's still the biggest factor, because I view this as not just a regional and local issue, as a national issue, because every major water body in the country is at risk here. And within our region, I think the ultimate target that we do not want to see an incursion in is total. And so again, all I can say is we put our word in and we're waiting to see, but I don't know more than that at this stage.
I do wonder if there's an opportunity, though, just in terms of what you raised, being ready for summer, if there's an opportunity for us to bring back some additional information and thinking, not just to yourselves, but also the broader stakeholder group that is engaged around golden clams, that we can put some thoughts to paper around what is a summer joined up collaborative response, what might that look like? Because I think even that is a useful exercise, because if we go through that, we find that actually that's going to require significant resourcing. Well, then that's the next conversation we can collectively have with central government, with MPI. So I'm wondering if we can put that on a bit of on the action plan for coming back. And I don't mean just waiting around to our next JMA hui. I'm talking about if this is a plan for summer, gosh, we're midway through October.
Yeah, I'll put that action up. Thank you, Madam Chair. I am part of a operational group at the Regional Council, and we do meet on a fortnightly basis, I think it is. So no doubt we'll have a meeting coming up very soon. And so I'll pick it up from an operational level, make sure we make that.
Great.
Any more questions, feedback? You happy with that, Peter? So we'll wait to hear back. We can talk about it over lunch, I'm sure. So just for procedural reasons, I'm going to move that we receive the verbal update from Eva. Another seconder, please. Another seconder.
Sure, I'll
Yeah, happy to second.
Oh, students.
There we go. I know.
So I'm going to put the motion. All those folks say aye. Aye. It's carried. Beautiful. Okay, so we're now on to closing Karakia, unless there's anything else. Note to thank you for your forbearance about the discussion around golden clams. We note that we're only 10 minutes over Winston's run sheet, so we're doing very, very well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Roger to lead us in Karakia. So I think we'll produce the Karakia that's on page 37 of the pack. I'm going to stand. This is how we rock it. 2 minutes for council. So
we all stand.
And so you've got the Karakia on page 37, and we'll let Roger
Nā mihi kia koe, whia tātou. Whakakapita tātou hui, unu hia, tūnu tapu nui, kia wātea, kia māma, te nākau, te tīnama, te hineka. I te ara takatū, koia rā e rongo, e whakairi a ke kirunga, kia tīna, tīna, haume, nui, tāna.
Lovely to hear from you, Stu. I'm sure I'll see you again, Shane.
Oh, yeah, I know you're missing me, Danny, eh? It's been a while. Thank you. Ka kite.
Finish the recording here.
Yes, Stu.
Meeting closed.
Ngā mihi, kia ora.